Well, let me provide you with a brief summary of what happened. My girlfriend became pregnant, and despite the circumstances, I decided to take responsibility and stand by her side. We decided to keep the baby, and everything seemed to be going well. However, as time passed, I began to notice a change in her behavior. She started going out more often and receiving calls from unknown guys at our house. I suspected that she was cheating on me, but I didn't confront her about it. My priority was to ensure that our child was being properly taken care of, so I continued to stick around and provide for both of them. When I got a job offer out of state, I thought it would be a fresh start for my relationship with my partner. I was hoping that by being away from her bar friends, we would be able to focus on each other more and become closer. However, despite my efforts, things didn't quite work out the way I had hoped. It wasn't long before she found a new boyfriend, and although she tried to keep it a secret, she wasn't very good at hiding things. At this point, I didn't really care anymore. I had already formed a strong bond with my child, and it was clear even at 18 months old that he didn't have much of an attachment to her either. As much as it hurt to see my relationship fall apart, I knew that my child and I had each other, and that was enough to keep me going. I remember coming back from a trip one day, excited to see my partner and my child again, but as soon as I walked into our home, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. My kid was nowhere to be found, and I searched every room in the house to no avail. Eventually, I made my way to our bedroom, and what I saw there was the last thing I expected. My partner and her boyfriend were in the middle of a steamy encounter, and I was left feeling shocked, hurt, and disgusted. Despite the awkwardness of the situation, I tried to keep my cool and simply told them that I would be in the living room when they were finished. Of course, they didn't emerge for hours, leaving me to wonder what they were whispering about in there. Eventually, they came out, and I walked the guy to the parking lot to have a word with him. I made it clear that I wasn't mad at him, but I expected him to be decent and not engage in such behavior in my house. I also asked him to stay out of my beer, which was a small but important point for me. After he left, I went back upstairs and told my partner to go get my child. The next day, I made a quick decision to move out of our apartment and start anew. I found a new place to live and moved out in just 3 hours, while my partner was at her boyfriend's house with my child. It was a tough decision to make, but I knew deep down that it was the right thing for me and my child. The day after I filed for divorce, I was granted full custody of my child after 2 long years of legal battles. While I was grateful to have won full custody, the child support that my partner was ordered to pay was practically nothing. Still, I made the most of what I had and used the money to buy myself a few beers here and there, while also making sure that my child was well taken care of. I never made a big deal out of the child support situation, as I didn't want to raise any unnecessary drama. However, whenever my partner would get out of line or act entitled, it was fun to remind her that I was the one who bought everything for our child. Clothes, toys, food, you name it, out of my own pocket. This would always leave her fuming for a few days, which was a small victory for me. Looking back, I do have some regrets about how I handled the child support situation. In hindsight, I should have put the money into a savings account for my child's future rather than using it on frivolous things for myself. But at the time, I was just trying to make the best of a difficult situation, and I'm proud to say that my child never went without anything they needed. After my divorce, I decided to move back to my hometown and live with my parents while I figured out my next steps. Before we moved, I had bought my ex-partner a Toyota Accord, which we had shared. However, when we divorced, she wanted the car, and I didn't hesitate to give it to her. A few months went by, and I started receiving calls at work from the credit company, demanding payment that was overdue. Despite my numerous explanations that the car legally belonged to my ex-partner, the credit company refused to back down. Dealing with these aggressive and unpleasant individuals was frustrating, to say the least. However, one day, a low-key guy from the credit company called me and asked if we could work something out, as they were unable to locate my ex-partner. I was surprised and a bit taken aback, but I decided to help him out by providing the necessary information. I told him where my ex-partner was living, and even provided him with the car's plate number. I knew for a fact that she was at home at that moment, as she didn't have a job. Looking back, I realized that I probably should have been more cautious in providing this information, but at the time, I was so frustrated with the credit company's behavior that I didn't really think it through. In the end, it all worked out, and I was able to move on with my life. After I provided the credit company with my ex-partner's address and car plate number, I didn't think much of it until my phone rang about 3 hours later. To my surprise, it was my ex-partner on the other end of the line, and boy was she angry. She accused me of telling the credit company where the car was, which had led them to tow and repossess it. Her tone was hostile and aggressive, and it was clear that she was blaming me for the loss of her car. I didn't know what to say at first, as I was taken aback by her reaction. After a moment of silence, I explained that I had only provided the information to help the credit company locate the car, since they were having trouble finding it. I told her that I didn't have anything to do with the repossession, and that it was entirely out of my hands. Despite my explanation, she continued to be angry and hostile towards me. "Yep," I say with a smug grin. "Something you need to learn is, if you don't pay your bills, you don't get to keep your stuff. By the way, my lawyer is paid off. How is yours doing?" Click, click. That was a great day. Edit. I appreciate the kind words from those who have read and responded to my story. I don't consider myself to be an exceptional individual, but rather someone who did what was necessary to care for my child and ensure that he had a good life. It bothers me when parents boast about making sacrifices for their children, as if it's something noble, because for me, providing for my child was the most rewarding and enjoyable thing I could do. As for the one negative aspect of our relationship, it occurred when I tried to coach my son in t-ball. I've always been very competitive, and my son is more laid back. He didn't enjoy playing baseball, and we both agreed that it would be best if I stayed away from his practices and other activities in which he was interested. In case anyone is still wondering, the car that was involved in the repo incident was a Honda Accord, which was purchased for my ex-wife and me to share before we moved out of state. To those who doubt the authenticity of my story, I have all the necessary documents and transcripts to prove it. However, I don't feel the need to justify myself to anyone who chooses to be hateful or disrespectful. It's unfortunate that some individuals choose to behave in such a way, but I feel sorry for them and hope that they find more positive ways to channel their energy. The most important conclusion I derive from this story is to subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories in the future. Let me know what you thought about the author in the comments. Was his revenge too weak or too brutal?